All right, now joining me on stage, I would like to introduce Aftab Siddiqui, who will be presenting Do We Still Need Unauth IRR? Aftab is a senior Internet Technology Manager at Internet Society and traveled from Sydney, Australia to join us today. This is Aftab's second time presenting at NANOG. His first talk at NANOG was called, and I'm pretty sure this isn't how he phrased it, "No, it wasn't a hijack," at NANOG 82 in 2021. Welcome back to NANOG, Aftab. It's a pleasure to have you on stage with us today.
Thank you for the kind introduction. And literally, when that incident happened, that was my initial reaction. When people say it wasn't a hijack, I said, no, seriously, it wasn't a hijack at all. But yeah, thank you, everyone. My name is Aftab Siddiqui. I work for Internet Society, as you heard. The logo you see on the slide represent an initiative which I have been associated for last 5 years. Have led that initiative in the past, but now part of the research team, which is providing the data set to make it more reliable in terms of the measuring the conformance and the reliability of the initiative. That initiative is called MANNERS, which is Mutually Agreed Norm for Routing Security. You must have heard that acronym in last 2 days quite a lot. So I'm not going to bore you with that, with what MANNERS is and what we do. And yes, I'm still under a little bit of jet lag, but I was just talking to my friend on the stage and he said, yeah, it's 6 a.m. in Sydney, so I'm pretty much awake now and already had 2 cups of coffee. And thank you to the people who are making this really good flat white over there, which is helping a lot. So thanks to the sponsors. So how we end up here? As I said, I do a lot of data collection, looking at the data, looking at the numbers, that's my life, and see what are the problems, how can we resolve them, and how can we come up with a better data set in terms of dealing with the routing security issues. So it's all started when we decided that, well, Internet Society should have their own resources because we never had it in the past. So we got our resources from APNIC because I am based in the APNIC service region. And we got our resources back in 2021, /23, and that's what you all get from APNIC at the moment of IPv4 and a /48 of IPv6, and of course an ASN. So when we got it, of course, like any normal, sensible, responsible network operator, what you do is you create the route objects and the ROAS, and that's what we did. And I started announcing it from 2 places because we had 2 POPs, one in Sydney, one in Zurich. And you can have a look at all these, how we are connected to the internet right now. And most of it's mostly collecting data and research purposes. We run a lot of relying party software just to test how things are working. And people do connect with those relying party software for testing. Of course, no production services. But then all of a sudden, I was looking at the IRR data set and I found out that, hold on a second, why these route objects are popping up everywhere. We never created anything other than in the APNIC WHOIS database. For example, which I have presented here, some snapshots, that there are 2 very interesting objects which are showing that the IPv4 routes we have are originated by AS38790. Well, why? Our ASN is 141384. So why it is showing up a totally separate origin AS? And the problem is, well, we never created that object. So who is creating them? So that all started a discussion internally saying, okay, how big that problem is. I mean, I worked in the service provider industry for 15 years. I knew that people do that to just make sure that routing works, but I never saw an origin changing within a week of it being allocated by an unknown entity. And that is the problem. And that's the problem is we expect everyone to have the meaningful information, make sure that the route objects are there. We expect everyone to, every network operator to have their ROAs there to make sure that we validate that information and allow that to the global routing table, which is the very sensible thing to do. But the thing is, we had no relation with AS38790. We never asked them to do it, but that route object popped up. We said, okay, fine, that could be an anomaly. Let's reach out to the IRR service provider, which was RADb in that sense, and said, okay, fine, can you just delete those objects? And all kudos to them. They responded within 24 hours and say, yeah, that's a problem, we will delete it. And they just deleted it. So we said, okay, fine, we solved the problem. For 24 hours, because 5 more objects popped up, created by 5 more different entities. Again, no relationship with them. And it kept on going and going and going. And we made sure that we reached out to the support at RADb. And again, they were very helpful and deleted those objects. But the moment they deleted it, somebody else created it. So it was just a vicious cycle. And we said, okay, fine, let's give up. Whoever is creating it, and I mean, of course, we can see whoever is creating it, just let them do it. So we started on a different path and said, well, let's see how bad it is. And one thing I need to admit, as we do it in Australia, which is called the AusNog, if you don't put a meme, your presentation will not be accepted. So you will find a lot of memes here, so just bear with me. I just try to be as nice as I can. We don't do it in AusNog because it's normally it's very it's within the room. You can say whatever you want to say in that. So it's an honor system. IRR is an honor system. We all know that. It's not a news. But we all made sure that there is a trust involved in that. But so far, what we are seeing, that trust is missing. So what we decided, we say, okay, fine, which one is the biggest IRR database, which of course we all know is RADb. And of course, the second one we consider is the AllDB. There are several other unauthenticated IRR databases, but for the starting purpose, we said, okay, let's pick the big 2. Of course, RADb is the biggest one by all measures. So we have a team of 3 people, Max Tukey, who's not with the Internet Society anymore, but Amrish and myself. We started looking at the data. The first thing we did is started comparing with the RIR allocations, what you can see from the NRO delegation file, and then comparing it with those allocations and see what exists in the RADb. And of course, if you want to compare the data, if you want to parse the data, the best way to do it is create a JSON file. And that's what we did. And it's so that it is easy to parse to everyone, because otherwise, if you look at it, it's just the IRR data is in a text format. It's hard to parse. So first thing first we did is just converted everything into JSON format. So now everything is parsable. You can see a snapshot on the right. If you want to have a look at the data, you can do it yourself. We create the JSON file every fortnight, which is twice a month. So you can, and we have been doing it for 1 year, so you can check if there are changes in it or not. So let's start with the ARIN resource status. So there are 4 types of statuses in that data. And because when we started looking at it, it was very hard to put a number that, okay, this object exists in the RADb. It was exact allocation or more specific, and so on and so forth. So we categorize in 4 statuses. One is when you get a resource from RIR, we consider it as the exact allocation, right? So for example, in IPv4 terms, you got a /22, that is an exact allocation. But you are advertising a /22, a /23, and 2/24 for some reason, then it means you have more specifics and an exact. So in the object database, you will find out that there are exact allocations. Status 1 represent that object has an exact allocation plus more specifics as well. Status 2 said it's only exact. For example, only for /22 there is an object, but there is no for more specifics. Third one is there is no object for exact allocation, but only for the more specific. And status 4 is the best one, where it's like there is no object in RADb for this allocation, whether it is exact or the more specific. In terms of the IPv4 versus IPv6, you can have a look that most of them are in the IPv4 spaces rather than in the IPv6. IPv6 is still very much clean. In the ARIN region, there are around 350,000 route objects exist in the RADb, which corresponds to the resources from the ARIN region. So this is just an example from the APNIC. For example, 1/22 was allocated in 2011, right? And in 2011 till 2022, in the period of 2021, sorry, within 10 years, every 2-3 years, one entity created a route object with a different origin ASN. Every 2 years or 3 years. Within the span of 10 years, they created 4 different route objects. And in the span of that 10 years, the actual origin never changed in the routing table. But they kept on changing the origin AS in the route object. So one thing is, not everything is bad. So some of the data I'm going to share is just for information, just to understand how things are in the IRR dataset. But of course, some things are problematic, which we'll discuss at the end, but not everything is problematic, as we can see. If you look at the time series, of course, people started caring about the routing security and the routing and filtering around 2010 more. Before that, it was, okay, we trust everyone, so that was fine. But if you look at the more specific and the exact allocation around 2019, a major, it's not major, like only 2,000 objects were created, but in the more specific field in last year, around 40,000 objects were created only last year. Going into the more specific of status 2 and status 3, you will find out that it's consistently growing in the last 5 years. So, and 2022 was again a big exception with around 20,000 in status 3. It means only more specifics were created. Again, so who is creating those objects? In the top, the exact allocation, you will find that VeriSign has created around 3,000 objects. Charter has created 500, and then Crown Castle as well. In the exact, as I mentioned before, and you could see in the numbers I showed in the previous slide, in the exact, you do not see a lot of objects. For example, an allocation given to a resource given to an entity, and the same exact route object appeared in the RADb database. So that is not a big number, but the number started increasing when you go to the more specific ones. For example, the Verizon has created 21,000 objects, but again, as I mentioned, this is not a problematic data. They are creating objects because some of the objects were not even there. If you go to the Manners Observatory, you will see for the 701 and other 702, they never had the objects before, so they have started creating those objects, and they are also dealing with the legacy space, which we'll discuss at the end. So that's why they appear. So it's not the problem. Google has done, so now the problem starts from the third one, which I'm going to mention, is hgc.com.hk. They have created 13,000 objects for the resources in ARIN. So, so that is again a problem. Again, Hutch City, which is the same company as HGC, they have also created 7,000 objects. So if you combine both of them, they have created more than 20,000 objects for the resources in ARIN region. And most of the origin ASN they have used are also for the ARIN region. Going again into the exact for status 2, which is only exact and no more specific. Again, there are not many objects there. If you again go back to the specific, more specific, which is the status 3, the last one, you will see again Amazon and Verizon have created most of the objects there. Again, I do not see any problem in that. We reviewed the data. They are mostly the genuine objects they are creating for their own resources, again, because they're dealing with a lot of legacy space which exists today. So this is an interesting one. So when you create an object, of course, it has a prefix and an origin ASN, right? So what we have seen is entities are creating route objects for third-party ASN. For example, I have an account in RADb and I can create a route object for anyone, any prefix, any origin ASN. In that sense, maintainer 1828 has created route objects with 347 distinct origin ASN. It could be all of their customers, but I don't know. Maintainer RRR, which is the Roadrunner, I think, which is Charter, if I'm not mistaken, has created 272 distinct route objects with 272 different origin ASN, and so on and so forth. You can have a look at that in there. In the more specific one, again, 1828 pops up on the top. They have created most of the objects with different origin AS. In the exact, again, going back, it's the Roadrunner comes up on top, and 1828 again for the last one, which is the more specific, have created 1,300 objects with 1,300 unique origin ASN. It could be all of their customers, but I cannot verify that information if they all are their customers. Now, that, as I said, is not all problematic data. Some of them is, of course, why HGC is creating so many objects for the resources in ARIN, which exists, and the service provider exists in Hong Kong, and Hutchison is not providing that many services. I'm not sure here. So, so that is, some of them is problematic, but not most of them. For example, the Amazon and Verizon, we have verified that information, and we did not find any problem in that data at all. And they keep it quite up to date in that sense as well. So it's not a question mark, it's an exclamation. I was like, I don't know why. Sometimes you look at the data and you say, oh, how this is, I don't know how this works. So, I mean, I know a lot of people in VeriSign, and we can, I'm definitely gonna talk to them. I said they have created for one prefix, for example, 198.41.10/41.0/24, they have route objects for 127 unique origin ASN. They do advertise one prefix with several different ASN, and that's how their network works. It's a different design. But why 4/32 is something I would like to understand. There must be a reason, but having a /32 in the route object, it could be for the RTBH or maybe for something else. But that is something I would really like to understand that why. But the problem was that it was skewing my data, like it was not helping my data set at all. So I had to remove all the VeriSign of prefixes and ASN just to make sure that I can see a clear picture. But yeah, it is all these routes, most of the routes are for VeriSign, and their ASNs are there in the origin ASN. Now, if you remove that, the 127, 126 unique origin ASN, then you come down to a single digit value, which is between 8 and 10. So for example, 206.180.0/18 has 9 different origin ASN. Well, there could be a use case for that. The second one is 23.226.48.020, 205.157, and so on and so forth. The problem is, none of them has ever been advertised in the global routing table. So for example, the second last one was last advertised 4 or 5 years ago. So, but the route objects still exist with that many origin ASN. Of course, there more specifics are in the routing table. So there is no reason to be worried because, of course, we know the smaller wins. So /24, if somebody is creating it for /24, then it's a problem. But if it is for /18 and they are already covering it with the smaller announcement, then it shouldn't be a problem. Well, look at the second one. We have a /24 with 10 different origin ASN. Of course, they are advertising with only one, and it hasn't changed in last 6 or 7 years. And we looked at all the data. Things haven't changed in terms of the routing table, but of course, the new route objects are popping up quite consistently. In the exact2, where it's only exact allocation route object for exact allocation, it was only one in the larger category, which was really good. But if you go back to the more specifics, which is /24, as I mentioned, if you are leaving stale objects with /24, you are leaving yourself vulnerable. That it can be hijacked with those other 9 origin ASN if you are not using all of them. And of course, not everyone is using all of them. Now, Bogon, a subject which I really like. If you know me and if you follow the Manners blog, I have written about it a lot. I have done so many policies about Bogons. I am the one responsible for the RPKI AS0 tel in at least 2 regions. At least 3 regions. But anyway, looking at the Bogon. Bogon is a private, what consists of a Bogon? Bogon is private address space, reserve address space, unallocated address space. It could be IPv4, IPv6, or ASN. That's what we call Bogon. If you look at the Bogon ASN, there are a lot of objects of ARIN resources which are pointing to objects which are not allocated to anyone. And if you look at the number of those objects, it is close to 50,000. So there are objects in the IRR database where origin AS does not belong to anyone. So that leaves a big loophole for an origin hijack if you are only relying on filters based on IRR dataset. And if you look at some of them, so there are route objects with private ASN. I do not see any reason to have a route object with private ASN in a publicly available data IRR database. So yeah, there must be some reason, but that reason is pretty old. Like you can see the number, the year when they were created, 2015, 2014, 18, 15, well, as early as 2023. So the people are still creating them. I don't know why, but at least based on some information, at least in the APNIC region, we restricted any route object with private or reserved address ASN in the origin. So, but anyway, RADb do allow that, and you can see there are a lot of them. So then the comparison. So you compare that, okay, fine, there are 357,000 route objects in the RADb which correspond to the resources in the ARIN region, right? As per the NRO delegation file for the ARIN, there are 357,000 route objects in the RADb. And if you compare it with the 900 odd thousand IPv4 routes in the routing table, then you compare, okay, fine, now what is the match? And I had to run this. I had to run this at least twice. I had to check it with my colleagues, saying if this is right or not. And the total matches are only 5,400, which is just staggering. And I was like, okay, so what is happening with the other 350,000 ones? I don't know. Your guess could be as good as mine. I did not do that, did I? Ah, okay, yes, I did it. So, well, if you think that's bad, It's not. That's a good news. APNIC is bad. For example, I mean, not APNIC, sorry, APNIC region is bad. APNIC is good. APNIC is an organization. Sorry. Yeah, I'm sure somebody from APNIC is going to say, that's not good, right? You have to come back at some point. So anyway, the APNIC region resources are bad, just to clarify. For example, I was talking about that organization, HGC, which has created around 20,000 objects for the ARIN resources. Well, guess what? They have created 50,000 objects for the APNIC resources. So it's not that bad for you in ARIN. Again, for the Hutch City and HGC is the same organization. For the more specific one, they have created more than 125,000 objects. And they've been consistently doing it for last 10 years. Again, if you go back to another organization, it's there, APT. Okay, so I mean, it's a funny story about that. So it's the third last on the more specifics. It's the maintainer ID is last updated ID called nobody@aapt.com.au. They have created close to 40,000 if you combine all the objects in the RADb. And I was presenting it at OSNOG, and a guy came to me after the presentation, and he said, I wrote that software 9 years ago. I have no idea that it is still running. So I will try to find out that where that software still exists. He has left that job 4 years ago. So so the problem is it's an automated system. Of course, we know nobody's just sitting there and creating 50,000 objects manually. So of course, it's an automated system, but it's been just running for that many years, and it's still running today. If I get a resource from the APNIC today, AAPT will just pop up a route object in RADb for no reason. For the exact allocation, and if I start announcing a more specific that, within 2 days or 3 days, it will pop up again for those more specific resources. So yeah, if you want to compare it with other RIRs, you're pretty good in that sense. But that doesn't solve the problem. So the problem is we still rely on IRR data, because we are not there yet into because of the ROA adoption. We have seen it in the last 2 days. The RPKI is good, it's perfect, it's working, but it's not there yet. It's whatever. It depends upon how you measure the ROA adoption. We are still under 50%. Yes, most of the major resources are covered, but still we are not there yet. In that sense, solution. I heard about the announcement from RADb that they will be moving towards IRRD4, which is really good, but then it means they will be checking against the RPKI ROA. Then why can't we just move to RPKI ROA? But yes, it will clean up. It's a stopgap solution. It will help, but I think it's much better if we start moving to the RPKI and help everybody do the right thing. Legacy resource, it's more of a complaint towards the RIRs. Come on, it's too late, just fix it. It's a political issue. There is no technicalities there. If we can just get over with it, it will help us more towards a stable internet. Encourage operators to use RPKI and drop invalids. As I said, remove any bureaucratic obstacles preventing legacy resource holders from using RPKI as well. The last thing, we are conducting a survey just to understand that why people are still using unauthenticated IRR databases and not moving towards the authenticated one, which is the one provided by ARIN. So please fill up the survey if you can. And the last point from my end is the answer to my own questions. Do we still need unauthenticated IRR? Unfortunately, yes, but not for too long. And you can make that possible as early as possible if moving towards RPKI or moving towards ARIN or your respective RIR database. That's all from my side. Thank you so much.
Are there any questions for Aftab?
RADb, but I don't have a comment on what any of you just said, but the VeriSign prefixes, that's a.rootservers.net, and that's Anycast. So I don't know if you mentioned that and see that in your slide. So that's the reason there's 127 different origins because of Anycast. So.
Yeah, I mean, literally, I found out after looking at the data that that's how they are running their Anycast with 127 origin ASN, but I still don't have an answer, which I'm going to ask Ibra about that after this presentation, that why the /32 exists for few and not for all of them. But yeah, thank you so much for providing that. And again, just to clarify, this is not, there is no complaint against RADb, because the support RADb provided us to help us understand so many things and clean up some of the data was just exceptional. So, but the ecosystem is wrong. We'd like to fix that ecosystem. So that's the only message we have. If nothing else, then
All right.
thank you so much.